Is commercial property the new black? According to Helen Tarrant, it's the next big thing.
These investors are going to see the next 2 to 3 years that commercial property is going to have better capital growth than residential. The floodgates are going to open and people are going to be throwing themselves into commercial property.
From child migrant to law student and beauty boss, this tiger mum now plays in the big league and she wants your kids investing before they hit year 10.
I'm an Asian parent. I'll be telling them at 12 that they need to get $20,000 through their YouTube channels and through them working to accumulate that. And that by the time they're 15 or 16, they should be putting that into property already.
It's bold, it's fierce, and it's 10 with Ty. Hi, I'm Tyron Hyde, the CEO of Washington Brown, the property depreciation experts. Now, I'm a qualified quantity surveyor and also a best-selling author who's helped hundreds of thousands of property investors over the years pay less tax through depreciation. I'm also an avid investor, which is why I created the podcast series 10 with Ty, where I ask the smartest people I know the same 10 questions to unlock the keys to their success and hopefully leave a playbook for my family and your family too about investing. Now, this podcast is general in nature and not specific to your financial circumstances. We always recommend you sit down with an accountant or financial planner before making any investment decisions. Now, let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to 10 with Ty. If you've ever thought about investing in commercial property, then today's episode is just for you. My guest is Helen Tarrant. She's the queen of commercial property, a buyer's agent who's closed over 1,000 commercial property deals. She knows the pros and cons, the pitfalls, and the massive potential. She wrote a book called Cashed Up with Commercial Property, is a co-author of this book with me, Secrets of Property Millionaires. In fact, our chapters are next to each other. Welcome to 10 with Ty, Helen.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Now, let's start from the beginning. You were doing a law degree and also running a couple of salons at the same time. Now, that's not a normal hop, skip and a jump to become a commercial buyer's property agent. What was the progression? How did this happen?
Well, if you're Asian, that's pretty normal, and the only reason for that is there is a select handful of professions you can only go into. So, it's like law is one of them. And I always had the saying to my parents, I always said that, you guys are really, really smart because why have multiple children when you can have one child that fulfilled all your needs and dreams and hopes? I think the reason that I was became a beauty therapist was because my mother said to me, in Australia, everyone's really practical. You have to have a trade. And I was like, okay, so what do I do as a trade? And then Dad said, well, I never got to go to university. It's times. And, I was on the train one day and I saw this girl with all the law books and I thought, oh, her parents must be so proud of her.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, well, I better go to law school. So I had to go to law school and have a trade at the same time. So they didn't set the bar very high, did they?
But what made you want to invest in commercial property? What was the first step?
I went and did some residential education because like all good Asian children, you knew you were going to have to help your parents retire, that you were their retirement plan. You were their entire retirement plan. And that freight train was coming whether you liked it or not. And when you're an only child, you could just see it coming. And whether you like it or not, you were going to have to be part of it. So I was trying to invest in residential and my parents were one of those people that worked really, really hard. And then at 55 woke up and said, we didn't even know what retirement is. Mm-hmm. I think this is to illustrate how financial literate they were, how financial literate they were. Only maybe 6 months ago when I was going away for a while, I gave Dad some money and said, look, Dad, put this money into your offset account. And he says to me, what's an offset account?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was like, I can't believe you have a daughter like me who teaches you how to invest and you have no idea what an offset account is, right? So This is how financially literate my parents were. They knew how to work hard. They just didn't know how to make their money grow. And at 55, I couldn't see a way of getting them into retirement within 3 to 5 years. So I needed a solution. And I looked everywhere and commercial property was that solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what, you helped them buy their first, you put the commercial property into their super fund, or how did that work?
I did actually, after I did some of my own. So I challenged myself. So I went and bought a property in Sydney, in North Sydney, for $360,000. So that was my first property in 2012. And the reason I started that was because I worked as a salon. In a salon, I was a beauty therapist. I knew I made rent every single week, no matter what happened, right? And Bill, who was a dotty old owner of ours, would come in every week and collect rent from the hairdresser, from myself, from beauty therapist, from the apartment upstairs, and then he will go fishing. And I thought, well, his life is pretty good. So, what did you do, Bill? Oh, I bought this property. Originally was for my daughter. She decided not to continue on as a hairdresser. I rented it out. This is his whole retirement plan. One building was his whole retirement plan. And I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe that's the way I can get my parents to retire. So I got into commercial property, started looking. There was no education, nothing. The only book I could read on commercial property was from Dolph DeRue, and that was about the US. And this was back in 2010. No, there was no education on commercial property. So it's like there's no education on commercial property. But I kept looking, and I found this property in North Sydney, and it was $360,000, and it was an 8.6% yield. And I was like, something's wrong. Something's wrong, because residential, they teach you that, this is your gross, this is your negative, this is your break-even point. This is wrong. Like, you're so positive cash flow. What is wrong with the deal, right? And you don't know until you've done the deal. So I was just like, just do the deal, right? Just do the deal. Who cares? Right? Just do the deal. Let's see if it works, right? You got to give it a go. Like, I'm always been the person, just give it a go, jump out the plane, and then figure out the rest. You're either going to die or you're going to work out on the way. So for me, I bought that property. That property delivered $20,000 in passive income every single year. For 9 years, we've held it, and we sold it for $1,050,000 after COVID. So that is the essence of commercial property. And once I started buying the first one, I thought, hey, you know what? I'm just going to challenge myself. I'm going to replace $50,000 of my income with passive income from equity that I've got from my residential property. Let's see if we can do it. So I did it. I went out, and for 12 months, I went and found 3 properties, bought it, and replaced $50,000 in passive income. That's after expenses, after mortgage, everything else. So I thought, okay, I can do it. Someone else can do it. Get the course, create a course, start teaching people how to do it. Because I started then noticing people making all these little mistakes. So 2016, became an educator, still the only educator on the market that gives free education and information on commercial property in droves, like, YouTube channels. People can choose through hours of content, free webinars, all of this stuff, right, on commercial property. And became a buyer's agent in 2017 because just my clients said, well, help us buy some properties that you've been teaching us to do. And that's how the journey came about.
But I've actually my mother used to say to me, Ty, I've got a bone to pick with you. And I'd like to say that to you too, Helen. I've got a bone to pick with you because you've educated too many people. 8.6% yield. Last night on your webinar, you were showing that deals at 3.5%. Now, you've created too much competition. You should have been quiet so we could still get those good deals. Well, how do you respond to that, Helen?
Is absolutely the correct question, because I think all my competitors hate it when I have education, because I'm educating them to look for better deals than what they can present them. And I think that the market got ruined by residential investors coming in with a residential mindset. So I educated them. They understood, okay, we need to look for higher yields. But then they took back their residential mindset and they brought it into commercial and said, oh, okay, well, it's okay if the market's doing 7% and I will just pay 6.5% for that property. I'll pay a little bit more because ultimately it's going to grow in the back. It's going to go, right? So what ruined it was not the education, but the investors coming in and thinking, I can accept a lower yield because I've come from a growth background rather than a cash flow background. So as a result, when one buyer starts buying something at a lower return and a higher price, it starts to set a new benchmark. And then everybody else comes in, has to do that. And then you have to undercut the market again at 6%. So it actually started a bit of I think it's a residential push. It started a bit of a waterfall effect. So I'm actually hoping that with more education, investors can take a stand and say, hey, you know what? I'm not paying 6% for that. The right yield is 6.5%. And I'm only going to pay 6.5%. I believe that if there's enough investors who say, I'm not going to pay 6% in this area, then we can actually work towards bringing the yields back up in commercial property.
What I don't get, last night you were showing some deals of childcare centres on this webinar at 3.5% yield. Why would you buy a commercial property on a 3.5% yield? I know they had a long lease, and I know there's great depreciation on commercial property, but still, I think I look at that and go, I'll just put my money in a Commonwealth Bank CMT account and get 5%. Why would I take the risk at 3.5%?
Full growth and wealth preservation. So one of the things about commercial property, if you look at the history of commercial property, where it came from, is that most people use commercial property as wealth preservation and generational wealth. So my question to you is, if you were going to pass on in 20 years' time, 30, and hopefully you don't, but say 50 years' time, would you rather leave your child with a property that is negative or gives them 2% return on every million? Or would you like to leave your children with a property that gives them 6 to 8% return on every million?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The 6 to 8.
And that's the key question, 6 to 8%. But that requires you, but knowing also when you pass on that property will last a lifetime of your children. That it's not going to have a vacancy, it's not going to have that volatility where your child is forced to sell, that you're essentially passing on guaranteed income and retirement to your children for the span of their lifetime.
But I could pass on that $1 million at 5% in the CMT account.
But your children could also go and spend that tomorrow. But at the childcare, they wouldn't. Just
all right. Let's switch gears. On this webinar last night, it was pretty fascinating. You're pumped for this year for commercial property. You're saying a 20% increase. You're predicting a 20% increase over the next 12 months. What are you seeing out there? Why are you saying that?
There isn't enough returns in the market, full stop, in investments right now. But commercial offers the one single thing that investors are looking for, that I believe that we're faced with aging investors. So investors coming into the market aren't 20, 30-year-olds at the moment, right? They are coming in, but not in the same drove they did back 10 years ago. Back 10 years ago, the drove of people coming in that was a lot more. Now there's less. Most investors are now in their mid-30s to that mid-50s range, right? So what happens in that range is you can't afford negative gearing. Like you really are. You want to increase your portfolio, your wealth, but you can't afford to be negative. What you need to do is build a portfolio that is self-sustaining. And commercial property offers your portfolio from day one that is self-sustaining. And that's why the residential investors who've spent 10, 20 years building a portfolio now has equity is going to shift gears into commercial and buy self-sustaining portfolios. Now, one of the other really, really interesting things that's happened in this market that people haven't seen, and I'm willing to bet on this, and I will have this conversation 2 to 3 years' time, is commercial property hasn't even gone nuts yet, right? Right now, we're seeing the next level from the early adopters. The early adopters came in 2016 to 2019. That's where the early adopters comes in, right? During COVID, people came in, but they came in at like the gold rush. They kind of go, oh, it was good, let's just buy something, right? They didn't know, right? Now we're seeing serious investors who are going, okay, we're early stages, we're going to be buying in, we're strategically buying in. Now, these investors are going to see the next 2 to 3 years that commercial property is going to have better capital growth than residential. Once that's been established and there's transparency, the floodgates are going to open and people are going to be throwing themselves into commercial property. And because what's happened is last 10 years, we've had no transparency. The problem with commercial property is there's no transparency. You can't tell a listing that they're listing a property for $5 million. And you look at Google history or ARCI data or whatever, you go, 2 years ago, that property was 2 mil. How did it become 5 mil? You had no idea that during the time they got a new tenant, they gutted the premise, they did all sorts of things, and now it's worth 5 mil. There's no idea why and how. You can't track capital growth. The other myth in the market is also that during COVID and all of the economic conditions, people was going to do fire sales of commercial property. And all of these high interest rates were going to be putting pressure and people were going to liquidate. It didn't happen. We've had 3 rounds of it. It didn't happen. The market will show in the next 2 years or 3 years is the stability of commercial property, but the capital growth that commercial property will continue to demonstrate that will outstrip residential will now create a frenzy even more in the next few years. So this is a great buying opportunity.
When you say commercial, you're talking office, warehouse, and retail, or are you just talking? Because a lot of people just say commercial. That's offices. Are you saying the whole gamut there, or?
It's everything. So your warehouses, your retail, your office space, we do all of that here at Unicorn Transact across the whole of Australia, but also some of your mixed tenancies. So your commercial with so you might have office space above residential at the back. Sometimes those can be repurposed. You could have warehouse with showrooms. You can have retail below and office space above. So the whole thing. Like childcare, for example. But co-living is not a commercial property. People get this wrong. Co-living is not a commercial property. Boarding houses are not commercial property.
From the bank's point of view, do they treat them as commercial property though, and only lend you 70%?
No. So they treat them under the commercial banner, but they're not assessed the same as commercial property. So they're part of the commercial division, and how they treat boarding houses and co-living is they treat them like Airbnbs. So you need to demonstrate 2 years of your income.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas in commercial, you just show them the lease.
Mm-hmm. And what's your go-to? What's your favorite? Commercial, resi, warehouses, or what's your favorite?
My absolute favorite is taking on someone else's headache and sorting it out and creating that uplift. That's what I do personally. That's what I do for some of our big syndication deals. What I love about it is the expertise that it requires, and very few people, we're probably one of the only companies out there that can actually do this, is look at everything that people just typically go, here's the dump, we have issues everywhere with this property, how do you sort it out? Mm-hmm. And that's my absolute favorite, because I know the gains you could get for that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, but if I'm a first-time investor, so I want to buy $1 million commercial property, right? How much money do I need to put cash to make that deal happen?
So if you're in your own business, you may only need about 20%. So 200K plus expenses, so maybe 250. If you are topped out on the other end, or you have lots of residential and you have business loans and everything else and you can't service anymore, then you probably need somewhere around 350 to 400K. So the bank can give you a 70%, up to 70% LVR on a property without looking at you for servicing.
Right, fair enough. All right, one final question before we get into my world famous 10 with Ty questions, Helen. These super changes that are about to happen, okay, with revaluing up $3 million revalue, taxing on unrealized gains. How are you seeing clients wanting to sell property to realize assets now, or is there any changes you're seeing in regards to that?
I don't think it's really sunk in yet with our clients. I think it's going to take a good 12 to 18 months before that sinks in. I don't think it's going to create a massive sell. Most clients coming into the commercial space aren't looking for those quick wins. They're looking for that stability of income. And look, the taxation of that could be treated as a next generation problem, right?
Yeah, true. I'll tell you what, I think it's going to happen. I think valuers are going to get a lot more work. Right, and it's going to be handy to have a handy valuer, because obviously, if you're taxing the unrealized gains and they're being valued lower, well, then the unrealized gains aren't as high, are they?
Yeah, that's right. Right. You're going to have to start bribing your friends who are valuers.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And if you do, and you leave a comment, send me an email to tyron@washingtonbrown.com.au, and I'll send you a couple of my books for free.
You ready to play 10 with Ty, Helen? So, Helen, what was your best investment?
Best investment. Childcare centre, rundown childcare centre in Townsville.
What? Tell us a bit about it.
I was on not compliant property. The tenant had been there for 20 or so years, bought that for about $400,000, did a refurb. Like, I found out things like leaking sandpits and how hot surfaces don't work. Some edges and footings, sailcloth. I learned all of these new things about compliance of childcare centres. Cool, air cons, all of these specific things very much to childcare centres. Anyway, refurbish things like rebuild a sandpit and things like that. Then got the tenant on the 10-year lease, sold that property for about $730,000 within 12 months.
Cool. So what I'm guessing here is you're making a bit of money out of people's hurt. Like this is where, and I agree, like there's pain is where a bit of profit is sometimes, right?
I like to look at the really messy properties because I can see there is value, but it takes a particular skill set. So normally people have run down their properties. I've had clients who I've given them a 9% yielding property, and 3-5 years later, they come back and go, here you go. Can you help me sell it? It's half empty. And I'm like, what did you do? And I've worked with them for 6 or 9 months, bringing that property back to full tenancy, doing all the works they didn't want to do, bringing it back up, and they're selling it. So it does take a skill set. It's not hurt, it's ignorance. And just let it be, because they don't understand in commercial property, there's a tipping point. If you don't do work at that tipping point, then everything starts to crashing down.
Is there one particular deal that you've done on behalf of someone else that you went, wow, that was a cracker, I wish I kept it myself?
Yes, absolutely. I did it as a syndication. I wish I got into it.
Right. Okay.
I made our clients 40% return on their money within 2 years, plus distributions on top.
Yeah, cool.
So it was one of those deals that all the funds rejected. So the small funds looked at. It was a $7 million deal. Our clients came together to buy that deal. And it was an international fertilizer company. So they had 8,000 square meters under a roof on like 1,000 square meters of property. And they had 18 months to go on their lease. So on a national company, on such a big deal, like if they were to leave, the repurposing will be huge, right? So I came in, I looked at the deal and I said, look, the tenant will renew. The tenant will renew as sure as I stand here, but they may not renew for 5 years, they might renew for 3. Their leases were like amendments upon amendments upon amendments. It was such a messy lease. So we bought that deal. We restructured the lease. We got on well with the tenant. We bought it at just about $7 million at about $600,000 in terms of net rent. So about an 8% roughly return. So it was phenomenal. And this was 2 years ago. We bought this. And then, so our clients got like 7% returns after all the costs and everything, returns on their money. And then we negotiated the lease. We took, thanks to friends of the valuer kind, we took the rent from $600,000 to $795,000 within 2 years. Got them to sign a 5-year lease, then sold that property immediately for $9.275 million.
Wow. Now, this is one of your syndications, was it?
This is one of our syndications.
Do you want to briefly run? I know this is not supposed to be an ad for Unicorn, even though you've got your big ad there on the side, but tell us a little bit about how these syndications work.
Okay, so syndications is really trying to get to the higher end where the profit margin, whether you get the 3 trifectas, which is capital growth, cash flow, and security. We get to all 3 of them at the top level. That's where the institutions and the family offices buy, but they're all 20 mil plus deals, right? But they have all of those things in those deals. So you get your high yields above 7s, you get your really government, national, international tenants, and you get your security in the fact that they can't really move anywhere else. So you get the high quality, you got the land component. Taking all of those, breaking them down to unitized levels of 2 to 5, 400,000, clients can come in, buy a unit in them. That deal is put in together as an investor pod. People as a pod work together. We have asset managers and myself, we drive the deals to uplift the deal or to renew leases. And then at the end, we look to sell it within a 2 to 5 year period, depending on the project. And in the meantime, the client gets cash flow and they get the uplift at the end. So best of both worlds. Great for those people who can't afford to buy bigger properties, but still wants that gain.
All right, question number 2. What's been your worst investment, Helen?
So my worst investment has been, I bought a vacant property hoping to put a medical tenant in there. I think at the time I was very new to an area and an agent. So I trusted the wrong agent on the ground. And it was an 18-month period. I could not get the tenant. And we had about 4 rounds of tenants that looked at the property, didn't want to pay the rent, even though we offered to refurbish and do all of that. In the end, we sold it to an owner-occupier. We made the money we bought it for plus our stamp duty back. But we didn't make our gains. We didn't get the exponential 40% gain that we typically do for an uplift. But and I wasted 2 years of my time because of utilizing the wrong people on the ground.
And what's some common traps that you can tell investors out there to avoid? I saw you on a webinar. You went through this contract with a fine tooth comb. It was really cool. So, but what are some of the common traps that you see novice investors in commercial property make?
Buying the wrong yield, buying the wrong returns, looking at it as a transaction rather than building a portfolio. Here at Unicorn, we build portfolios. We don't just help people buy properties. The thing is, I had this thing illustrates. I'll show you a story. I had someone who called me and wanted a strategy session. So I booked in a strategy session off our webinar, and it was a gentleman from that lives in Campbelltown in Sydney, and he had a friend in ACT, and they said, we've been to a few of your webinars, and now we're going to buy a commercial property. All right. When someone says, I've been to a few of your webinars, and now I know all the knowledge that I know to buy a commercial property, that's already a red flag. So I said, that's great. What are you going to buy? We just want your opinion on this. Okay. Don't want to engage us as a buyer's agent. We just want your opinion on this. That's fine. What are you going to buy? There is a NAB and Bendigo Bank in Mount Gambier that we want to buy for $2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So I say to them, no, not Mount Gambier, Mount Barker, in Mount Barker in South Australia and in Adelaide that we want to buy. And I said, firstly, have you been to Mount Barker? No, haven't been to Mount Barker. Do you know where it is? Yes, it's about 30, 40 k's out of Adelaide. So, okay, so what's the yield on this? It's 7.5%, and that's what I'm going to buy. How long's the lease? It expires next year. So I'm like, how do you know the tenant is going to renew? Oh, well, the agent thinks it's most likely going to renew. Okay, great. So you are a novice commercial property investor. You've been to a few webinars, and you're going to sink $2.5 million into a place you've never been to, don't know, just looked on Google Maps, just because it has a tenant that's a bank tenant and that the agent said is most likely going to renew. Mm-hmm. That's got red flags so into everything, right? So I said to him, okay, let me break this down to you. You think Mount Barker is like a Camden in Sydney, right? Just out of Sydney. He's like, yes. I said, no. Mount Barker is not like a Camden. It's like a regional town driving between Sydney to Canberra, where your friend is at the moment. And he's like, oh, okay. That's number one. Number two, never negotiated with a bank. Do you know that banks at the moment are actually pulling out and signing shorter and shorter leases? No. Do you know that just for 7.5% yield, that when they vacate, being a regional area, the supply of tenants is about 10% of what a metro city would be. So to get another tenant to replace the same rent as the bank will probably be highly unlikely, considering they've been there for so long. Don't know that, right? Now, I said to him, the true way of really doing that is not a 7.5%. If you were my client, I would never put you into a property like that, especially your first time and wanting to spend $2.5 million, right? I would be looking at buying that property at a 9% yield because it's regional and it's got a bank tenant. There's a risk that they won't renew, and plus the other rents might come in low. I would be buying that at 9%, working through and negotiating by giving them incentives and extras, which could take 6 months with a bank. We've negotiated with a NAB. We know how long it's taken to get a new lease, and then selling that back onto the market for a 7% yield when I have a new 3 or 5 year lease. I said, that's the game. Not the game of buying that as a 7.5%, because what you're going to find is the bank will play hardball and you're the little person, they're the big person. They'll play hardball, you'll cave in, your rents will drop, and it ends up in a 6% yielding property in Mount Barker, and you've just lost $500,000 on the value of that property.
Also, a lot of those regional banks are purpose-built. They're pretty unique buildings that kind of are made for banks, right? And then you also got the safes involved as well. They've got to be removed, et cetera, right? Yeah, no, we've done a bit of work on that.
Yeah, so that's the pitfall. Like people who been to a few webinars think, okay, great, I can now go and buy. What does someone say to me? You pay for it either way, just whether you pay for it in real education, paying a professional, or you're paying for it in education by fucking it up.
Yeah. I always worry, like when you see a deal, say it's on a 5+5 lease and it's you're in the 4th year of the first term of that lease, right? Why would anyone buy that? To me, it's like, well, the reason that the guy's selling is he knows the tenant's going to leave, right? That is my number one red flag with commercial. Is that right?
Not always. I think the thing is this is another thing that comes down to it is a lot of people who are commercial property investors want to sell and they go, I'm going to sell. That's it. Put it on the market. That's it, right? They never spent time tidying up that property. If they had spent 3 months tidying, like going back to the tenant to renegotiate the rent or the lease, giving them some incentive to get them on a longer lease, looking at all their pest and building issues and tidy all of them up, they can get a property, their pricing could go up by 20%. But they don't actually do that. It becomes a trigger-happy scenario. Like I spoke to a client who wants to sell her property because she goes, oh, I think it's a dud. And I'm like, how do you know? Have you tried leasing it out? Have you tried selling it? Have you tried tidying up that property so that you can give it the best option to sell. And she's like, no. I said, but you're telling me you want to do residential flips. Why don't you first start out with doing your commercial? Like, you've got a property here, tidy up the lease, go and get a new tenant, and then sell it, right? So I think what happens in those stages is that when you're talking about, people are on that expiring lease term and everything else, is that it was a trigger-happy decision to sell rather than a conscious decision to sell. And if you're a savvy investor, you could actually be picking up a really great deal because knowing that most people will walk away from that deal.
Question number 3. What has been the most valuable investment advice you've ever received, Helen?
Look at the property of what it could be rather than what it is now. So what it is most people see now. All they want is now, right? But if you could take a property from good to great, then that should be your journey of property ownership, not that you want to buy great now. You could go to an auction house and buy great now, but you'll get 3%. That's what they're paying for. They're paying for great. But you could buy good for 5%, make it 7% in the great, and then sell it for 3%. Right? That's the good to great journey.
Yeah, I like that. All right, question number 4. What's your ideal portfolio mix?
My ideal portfolio mix has our 3 fundamental strategies, which is cash flow, growth, and uplift. So you got to have cash flow. So you've got to have anchor cash flow, and that will probably be somewhere sitting about 40 to 50%. Growth will probably sit somewhere around 20 to 30%, with 20% to 30% of uplift.
Right. But in different asset classes, or are you just talking all
different types of assets? Oh, across Australia. So because there's certain things that will only work in different states and won't work in the other states. So things that work in ACT won't work in Melbourne. Things that work in Brisbane won't work in Adelaide. So very, very specific to the area.
But what about shares, crypto, or are you purely commercial?
If this is where you're asking me about the portfolio, I thought that was just around property. But if it was a diverse portfolio, definitely, I think that people should be having 20 to 30% of their investments in other forms. So whether it's shares, trading, investing in businesses that grow are really key, and also also in your trading something liquid, right? Because you never know, you might find a really, really great deal that you need to liquidate. Yeah.
All right. Question number 5. If you've got a couple of kids now, when one of them turns 20 and they come to you and say, "Mom, I've got $20,000. How should I invest it?" What would you tell your child?
I'm a nation parent. I'll be telling them at 12 that they need to get $20,000 through their YouTube channels and through them working to accumulate that. And that by the time they're 15 or 16, they should be putting that into property already, right? My kids already featured in my YouTube videos turning up to inspections. And I was telling my son, who's 11, I said to him, look, you got to learn these things. I already made him sit into one of my seminars. I said, you got to learn these things because one day you're going to be doing this as part of the business.
Yeah, I loved it. You made me laugh. I love this last night. You were saying some parents take their kids to Disneyland or whatever. I take them on inspections to Mount Gambier. Yeah.
I have taken them to inspections in Mount Gambier. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Do you own an investment property? Washington Brown has helped over 250,000 property investors pay less tax with a depreciation schedule. Visit washingtonbrown.com.au to pay less tax today.
Question number 6. Now, you've just turned 50, you've got no money, and you've inherited $500,000. How would you tell someone to invest that $500,000? And you're not allowed to say, put it into one of your syndications.
I would say to them, take $250,000, buy something that is going to give you a cash flow base, that's going to give you some money for you to live on, right? Then take the $250,000 that you've got spare and put it into an uplift property where you can make $250,000 into $400,000. Grow that over the next 3 to 5 years till you get a pile of $1 million in cash. Divide that $1 million by $500,000 into a set and forget. Continue to build with your $500,000. You've got a 10-year horizon. You can shorten that into 7 years, but you've got to really plan for 10 years. And if you do that, you can retire within those 10 years between $100,000 to $150,000 in passive income with that.
Is that a common scenario of a client comes to you at the moment, like with the elderly generation, says, I've just got this money, what do I do with it? Does that happen?
All the time. I build portfolios all the time. My clients come to me and go, this is what I have. I said, great. You know what my specialty is? I dump on top of me everything you have, right? Everything you have, and tell me where you want to go. And my brain just goes, bang, here, move these pieces, start doing this. Here's your pathway. Implement, and you'll get there. Because there's a few levers you got to pull at any one time. But if someone comes to me and says, I've got 50K and I want $500,000 in passive income in 10 years, I'm going to say, no, that doesn't work, right? But if they're a doctor who says, I've got 500K, I've got equity of 2 mil that I could access to in the next couple of years, and I want to retire $1 million in passive income in 10 years' time, I'm like, that's absolutely doable. I can actually craft out a strategy and a blueprint for you to do that.
Mm-hmm. What's the? Do you have to turn, like with commercial? Because obviously you need a fair bit of equity, right? Do you have to turn a lot of people away in your business?
I actually don't think so. I actually think that that what I've learned from syndication and raising money, and we've raised $18 million in the last 2 months, right, on our syndication. So is that there's so much money out there for the right deals. So much money. Like it's the deals, right? If you were young and in your 20s and you had zero money, if I had no money tomorrow, my knowledge would be all I need to get back up, right? All I have to do is put the deal together and then pitch. It's all about pitching and getting people, investors into the deal, have a carried interest in the deal, and you'll be back on your feet, right? So you actually don't need money. You need knowledge. The knowledge, because there's so many people in their 50s, like I've got clients who are doctors, surgeons, pharmacists who are so busy, right? They just can't, they don't have time, right? And we say to them, here's a really great deal, to do X, Y, Z, this is why, okay, all right, just do it, right? Or this is the rest of it, just give me 10 minutes of your time and I'll show you what it is. And that's it, right? There's so many busy people that have cash that are ready to invest. You just got to bring them the right deal. And if you're young and have no money, that's the way you get started.
Interesting. All right, question number 7. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 20-year-old self about investing?
Buy more properties, buy industrial properties, because COVID's about to hit and that's going to change the trajectory of industrial properties.
Yes. Has that changed? Has that maxed out, do you think?
I think it's probably 6 months to go at the peak, till the peak.
Fair enough. I guess the other thing interesting, I think you touched on it last night in the webinar, was in relation to construction costs, right? And it's getting hard. I was listening to a big builder the other day called Wattpack. I don't know if you heard of them, but they were saying that with the Trump's tariffs, steel and aluminium, they're struggling to price jobs because they don't know what's going to happen in regards to the tariffs on those things. So when I was younger, when I was starting as a quantity surveyor, there used to be a thing called rise and fall contracts, right? So you would say, okay, well, we're allowing $2,000 a ton for steel. If it goes up to $3,000, well, the contract needs to move with that. And I think that might come back into play, particularly with what's happening in America.
I think so. Well, and this is why properties have become so much part of some of the family offices and also the high net worth allocation of wealth. Spending is that some of them are in the e-commerce business, and some of them, like I've had, because I mix a little bit in the whole VC world and the more the higher end world, and they said, like, when Trump signed that things coming out of China was going to get that that tariff, right? They had $120 million on a boat coming into the US. They had to turn away and go back to China. It was cheaper for them to dump that than it was for them to bring it on shore. And they could not afford to make another order because they just didn't know with the right of his pen, he could wipe out their entire wealth. Where's that wealth going to go? They're going to put that into real property where they can touch, feel it, right? So this is why some of these shifts are going to come into property that we're not expecting.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, question number 8. What legacy do you want to leave your family or your community, Helen?
I came to Australia at probably the lowest end of the spectrum, right? First generation migrant. My mother has $70 on her. We struggle to put food on the table. I want to leave this world at the top tier, right? Have traveled all the way through, so I understand how, not because of the money, but because I want to know, experience what it is like. But I want that my legacy here in Australia is to raise the financial literacy level of every Australian, so they actually have a conscious understanding of what it takes to retire and have a planning and have a blueprint of what they need to get to retirement and what they can do post-retirement comfortably, right? And for some people, that's traveling to Europe on first class every year. For some people, that's just a trip to Thailand on, in May, whatever the holiday specials are. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? As long as they know, conscious, and building towards it. So they don't wake up at 65 and says, I'm going to retire next year. How? What am I going to live on? I don't know, $20,000 a year. Who knows, right? So that's my passion. In terms of legacy to my children, what I'm going to leave them is when they're old enough, I'm Asian. We don't leave them with anything. We give it to them while we're alive, right? So
Good.
what we do
By zero.
yeah, by the time they are adults, they will have digital assets they can do whatever they want with. And that's, that may be, knowing how to speak in front of cameras, have their own YouTube channel, be able to do all the navigate AI, all of this stuff they're going to be able to put together. So if they wanted to become a digital nomad and go off grid and do all this and build businesses, they can. If they want to become an architect and sit behind a desk for 9 to 9, that's fine. Whatever they want, but I will give them enough digital assets to get them started, and then the rest is up to them.
Are they showing any interest in property, or are they too young?
I'm an Asian mother. They don't get a choice.
I can't call you Tiger Mum. I think is that.
I actually don't care what results they get at school. I just I expect you to be starting your own business soon.
Yeah, very good.
It's it doesn't matter if you failed at school, so it doesn't matter about that maths test. But you know what? We're gonna watch this video. How Mr. Beast how Mr. Beast became Mr. Beast.
Very good, very good. All right, we get to the end. Number 9. What does success look like to you, Helen? For me, you look pretty successful, but what does success look like to you?
I think it's really interesting. Success, what success means to me is actually being treated equal and being able playing on equal playing ground. Okay, so that is something I'll be fighting for in every space of my career. I was never the chosen one. Never the chosen. I was never chosen to be on stage. Never chosen to be to run this business. Never chosen to be. I was never the chosen one for let's say a client. The thing is, commercial property is a male-dominated industry. It's a white male-dominated industry. So I'm an Asian female. Right? To be an Asian female playing a white male-dominated industry, you have to outperform, outlast, do better than everyone else, and you're never the chosen one. And you have to be okay with that. But they're always going to look at someone else and go, you know what? I might go with them. Yeah, and then that's okay, right? So you have to fight harder and do better. Right? On stage, that's that not necessarily they won't choose you because you're the Asian female, right? But that's okay. Just create your own stage, right? So to be able to have an equal playing field would be a really, really great success. To be say, hey, recognize the things you've done, the hard work you've done, and to be able to open that floodgate would be really, really good. I would love the association of commercial property and Helen Tarrant. So that's what success looks like to me. When someone thinks of commercial property, they think of Helen Tarrant. That's what I'm working towards. And I guess to build lasting memories and experiences with my family.
So, question number 10, Helen. Now, the reason I started this podcast was because I saw my father lose all his money. In fact, I was in a commercial property deal, funnily enough. And so that's what this podcast is about. So, Warren Buffett is quoted as saying, rule number 1 in investing, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Helen, how do we never lose money as investors?
I'm going to counter that with another saying. Alex Hormozi said, if you want to make $100 million, you have to lose $10 million. If you want to make $1 billion, you have to lose $100 million to start with. It's the education, the price you pay for education, right? That you have to lose, right? So I guess my answer to that is you can't, if you live your life avoiding losing money, you would never play in the big leagues. You have to take a gamble and say, win or lose, I'm doing this. And what is my worst case scenario? So we're running Wealth Hacking Life, right? That's $100,000 to put the ads, people in the room. What's the worst case scenario? It could be a complete flop. You guys could show up. We could not have the sales in the room. We could not have people show up. You could just reflect really badly on me. I could lose $100,000. That's the worst case scenario, right? What's the best case scenario? That it's a defining brand. We kicked off something. We love being there with all the other speakers. Everyone learnt something. And this is something that is a good theme that we can continue on for years to come and build on it, right? Is the upside better than the downside? If you don't have 100K, probably. But the upside for me is a hell of a lot better. And every time I think of the upside versus the downside, yeah, like when we put our latest syndication together, we bet the farm. I bet the entire company, everything else I had, everything I had onto that deal, right? We settled that deal 5 minutes to 5 on the day the vendor was going to pull the deal because he was such a dick about it, right? He wouldn't give us, the bank called him personally and said, we will settle it first thing in the morning. And he says, no.
Really? Wow.
If the bank personally calls you and say, hey, mate, we just don't have capacity today, settle $20 million, right, today, we'll do it first thing in the morning. To say no, that's pretty bad, right? So that's what the kind of vendors we're dealing with the whole time. But it was a great deal. And, I could have lost a lot of money in that. I could have lost a lot of investor money in that. But, but now, ever since that deal's deals are now flowing to us. People calling us, goes, hey, God, this great deal, right? Do you want to put it together? Yeah. So we've now, one strip, we've defined a reputation and we're moving up.
Now, Helen, there's always a bonus question on 10 with Ty, because all the other questions are on the website, so it's not that hard. The bonus question to you is, why would I buy into an unlisted fund when I can buy something like Centuria Office Fund, which is obviously on the stock market, which is trading at $1.24, has a net tangible asset backing of $1.74 and a yield of 8.6%. Now, the other advantage of buying something on the stock market is I can easily sell out when I want to, whereas an unlisted fund, it's a lot harder.
It's mostly to do with association, right? In this modern era of people investing, people want to know, like, and trust. So they want to know that they participated in a development of a building. They want to go that we're part of that deal, that particular deal. A charter and hall is you are one of 10,000. In an unlisted property deal, you're one of 10, one of 20, one of 50, right? So it's a personal connection to the deal, to the person that's doing it, right? The returns ultimately is better because if you take it as a long stretch over a 5 or 6 year deal, because the uplift at the end, if you have the skill set, is better, whereas you will get the steady income. Steady income is great for people who retire, but remember, a proportion of our generation is not looking to retire. They're looking to level up. And a charter hall is not going to level them up, right? It's going to keep them at level, right? If you're in your 60s and you're retiring and you just want a 6-8% return after tax and stuff, that's great. But if you're in your 30s and 40s and you want the exponential jump to put in something for 300K and get 500K back, a charter hall isn't going to do it for you.
I'd argue that it could, because some of these funds have been hammered so much that, Centuria Office Fund used to trade at like $4, now $1.24. It could come back, and obviously the reason why it's gone down so low is because people feel like the offices, COVID hit and it got hammered, right? But people will go back to work. And the other thing about those funds is, like what we talked about before, they're not building any more offices. Centuria Office Fund put on their annual reports, there's no more office supply coming on the market in 2 years' time. So it will be absorbed, which will then increase the share price, I would have thought. You would hope.
You'll hope, right? Because this is the thing. It's the calculator returns versus banking on hope and prayer, right? It's the residential versus commercial argument coming back to that, because in residential, people buy hoping that because of historic growth, they're going to get future growth, right? That's the way it goes. But in the commercial space, it's like, okay, well, they're not building anymore for 2 years. But what's going to happen after that? Right? It's like 10 years ago, people forgot that every second warehouse in Sydney was vacant. 10 years ago, people could build enough office spaces to fill demand in Melbourne. Today, it's a waste. It's a ghost town, right? So we tend to forget. So, and the other thing is control and relatability. It's like, yes, you can be in Centuria, but how much control do you have in the direction they're going to take on their management board?
You don't have any, but you do have a diversified portfolio across many different states of 15 different buildings. So you are limiting your risk there as well, though.
Again, you could do that by investing in different properties and different deals, right? And again, it is about the capital uplift that you get versus stability, right? And they're two different things. If someone is a developer versus someone who wants to buy, set, and forget, they're two different mindsets.
Totally. And we can talk about this at the upcoming Wealth Summit packing event. Would you like to? So, just for those out there, I'm speaking at one of Helen's gigs soon. This is June. What's the date today? June the 3rd. So it is the first event.
First event's 15th of June in Brisbane. followed by Melbourne on the 17th and the 21st in Sydney. So the Wealth Hacking event is bringing together a collection of people in the wealth creation space to uplift you to the next level. We'll have professionals there like Tyron and yourself. We'll have people talking about asset protection, as well as all the things to do with trading, property, and leveling up to the next level in terms of your wealth creation journey.
So firstly, thanks for coming on. But where can people reach out and contact you, Helen, and need help if they need a commercial property?
So helentarrant.com. You can find a lot of information about myself. Unicorn.com.au. So unicorn with a K. unicorn.com.au. Unicorn with a K is a great place to be able to put in some details on our website and find us there.
Where'd the name Unicorn come from with a K?
I woke up one day and says, I'm going to call my company Unicorn. And I'm going to call it with a K. And the reason for that is, I've always just done that. Just woke up and go, yep, this is what I'm going to do it. So Unicorn, the reason for that is every client comes in the door, their dream property is a 10% yielding property to a national tenant with development potential under $1 million in Sydney. That's not achievable. It's never going to be achievable. It's Unicorn. So that's why I decided to call the company Unicorn. The idea is build a unicorn portfolio rather than look for the unicorn, and spelled it with a K because we're in the era of people having one-word businesses with an unusual letter. So, hey, why not? The C was taken. Make it a K.
Love it. Love it. Well, I've loved this. I could talk commercial property with you for about a week, I reckon. And I will at this Wealth Hacking Summit. So thank you for coming on 10 with Ty. I've really enjoyed it. You're a wealth of knowledge, and thanks again.
Thank you.
10 with Ty is brought to you by Washington Brown, the property depreciation experts.